is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us.
So first of all, Hal, thank you very much for inviting me. I know I got the invite about end of last week via email, and that was great. So I thought, what better way to present the Tenacious Founder than to use the Tenacious Founder to present itself, because that's what it's designed to do. It is a platform for startups, for founders. And as I mentioned, this is going to be it's going to be kind of meta, Tenacious Founder presenting Tenacious Founder. And the folks in this audience are exactly who I'm interested in. To add a little bit more meta to it, you could be customers, you could be investors, you could be using this to further your startup. So what we're talking about here is change, and change can be good if you're planning it and chasing it, if you're watching what's going on in the world and can take advantage of it, or it can be very difficult if it's unexpected. And it is what all of the startup world right now is about and has been. It's change. So let's see if I can get to my slide here and go to the next thing. For those folks that were from Texas, you might recall the great oil industry that about 125 years ago began, I think, Spindletop. And at that time, we had about 70% dry holes. And no, this presentation actually has nothing to do with oil wells. This is an example. 70% dry holes, and anybody who had any access to equipment would be punching a hole in the ground. They would be the wildcatter. The tool pushers on those rigs would be in charge of everything, throwing you off the rig if you didn't behave, getting all the equipment. And of course, the speculators, the investors, that's all of us folks, were investing money, hoping we find a unicorn. Here we are, 125 years later. There's less than 7% dry holes now. Before any piece of equipment moves off any yard anywhere to go drill a hole, they already know how much oil is down below, how deep it is, what it's going to take to get it out, everything basically about it. What's happened is the accuracy, the information has improved dramatically, and it's gotten expensive to do it wrong. So capital is not giving anybody any money if they can't prove first with very good information that there is a reason to drill. That's that industry. This also happens, I think, in the startup industry, because it's happening in so many different industries. In the 1960s, there was only 100,000 startups, kind of local businesses, shoe stores, university spinouts, etc. Just, 70 years ago, 80 years ago? Now, 2020, 5 million startups a year. Now, some of those are just companies that are filing for EINs for various purposes, but still a significant part of those, especially in this environment that we have right now with job security being difficult and AI threatening everyone's jobs, we still have an enormous amount of people, and growing, starting up companies. But unfortunately, 85% or more are still failing. And capital is getting tighter. About 20 years ago is when all of the major VCs, Sequoia, all of the different investors decided they needed to see information more succinctly before making any decisions. So they were asking for proof. So that's what's going on, the change that's going on. And everyone should be aware of this big change, especially with AI coming in and is going to be analyzing all of the pitch decks before you even get a chance to pitch. So let's get prepared for that and perhaps use some AI on the founder side so you can compete or be seen when you need money. So this is the Tenacious Founder. Now we're actually starting what it is. The upper left-hand corner, secure startup maturity level, 4 levels, comes from Bell Mason Group. You guys may remember Bell Mason Diagnostic, the 4 circles that show that a A startup starts at concept, then seed, then product development, then market development. We've all used this. This is standard terminology. This is going back 40 years or more. Just to the right of that, 5, 6, 7, and 8, those are advanced steps once a startup becomes a company. You first do projects, then they go to process. And there's process can be more advanced, it can be defined, it can be quantified, it can be optimized. And now we have obviously AI processes and automation going into place, but it's the same. And in the reality, there's only 3 ways to do anything at all. You can either ad hoc it, kind of hold my beer, wing it, seat of the pants, which we all do from time to time in various things, or you create a project. And a project just means you've thought through what your goal is, made a plan, and then pursue it. It may be a bad project. You may not have thought through it very well, but it is a project. And a process happens once you start to repeat what's working in project form. So that's the basis of the Tenacious Founder. I also reviewed all of the big pitch decks out there from all of the major giants, Y Combinator, Sequoia, Guy Kawasaki, Lean Startup, McKinsey, Gartner, and you see the elements down at the bottom, 1 through 17. They all have section pieces of these elements in there. Matter of fact, there's 70% overlap. They've covered problem, opportunity, competition, solution, hypothesis, your capability, all of these things in their pitch decks. What I've done is to look at those top decks and identify all of the commonality across them. And you end up with 17 elements that they all have. It also follows kind of standard procedure that you learned back in the 6th grade when you're moving from or using scientific method, going from an external observation, the problem, the opportunity, the competition there in green, coming up with your solution hypothesis based only on the external view, and then proving or testing your hypothesis, whether you have the capability as the CEO or as with the team, through your operations, with a product that will work, with a product you can deliver, all of those. This is the fundamental core of the Tenacious Founder, and it has AI assistance to make it work. So again, what's the problem? I'm going to literally quickly go through some of it, not all of them, because I only started on this deck last week using Tenacious Founder to build Tenacious Founder since Hall said, come and present. But here it is. 1, what is the problem in severity? 80 to 90% of startups fail, 10 to $12 trillion loss. Wildcatting isn't cutting it anymore because investors are saying no. They started saying no a while back by looking at those pitch decks to see if it gave the critical information to be able to weed out, to cull out those investors or those pitch decks that don't make sense. Market opportunity. This is our founder ecosystem. When you start a company, it's not just for yourself. It impacts a lot of other people, competitors, the community, future generations, suppliers, vendors, contractors, etc. But the core tribe to a founder is its company, its capital partners, and those mentors, advisors, and consultants that help them out. When a company fails, it's one of those 3 groups or all of those 3 groups that feels the 10 to 12 trillion dollar loss, or at least a big portion of it. Here's the problem, and this is, or pardon me, the competitive landscape that describes the problem. You can look at companies there are startups that are building the company and startups that are completely focused on the product. And usually companies or startups are very focused on the product and they fail to build the company. Those that actually recognize they need to be building the company, they may pick one or more of these tools, EOS, Great Game of Business, or some project management, and they use it like a hammer where everything is a nail. But there is a clear mixture of some that are focused on building your product, such as the Lean Startup, and does not have a lot of components there for building your company, or for instance, the Bell Mason Diagnostic, but it is a diagnostic tool, not a building tool. In the end, most confused founders, if they recognize they have to build all of this, They will pick one tool and apply it everywhere, perhaps too much too soon or too little too late. And this is the reason, basically, why there are so many failures. They ran out of cash because they weren't watching cash. They didn't get along because they didn't have the structure inside to communicate with each other. But the core component here is a system that needs to play the part of the general manager or the general contractor that determines what needs to be done, how much, in the right sequence at the right time. Silly analogy here, but if you're building a house, you got to be careful that you don't put the sheetrock on before you've put the plumbing and the electrical in the walls. And that's the general contractor that understands the sequence of things: foundation, framing, plumbing, electrical, sheetrock, roof. There is a sequence and an order. And when you're doing the startup, very few startup people have done it before, and they don't understand that sequence. Most of them are just infatuated with their product. Our solution hypothesis: Tenacious Founder is built unapologetically at all of the lessons of history, craftsmanship, engineering, etc. Our mission is to improve startup success by helping founders at all levels, even through a scaling company, apply the right tools at the right time for the right purpose. Our three stakeholders that we're really paying attention to: the founder tribe, the company itself, the capital partners, you guys who are investing the money, give you guys visibility into the startup so you can watch progress, make sure things are happening as expected before the startup airplane crashes into the mountain. You get that phone call, help, we're in trouble. And now as an investor, you've got to go figure out what happened. I'm trying to create visibility so you can see those things and react beforehand, and as well providing guidance for the advisors, mentors, and such to help it through. We're doing this with an architecture and delivery that includes, yes, a playbook, yes, checklists, but not just those, downloadable templates and asset structures, interactive founder workspace, Notion and cloud management, and AI-assisted SaaS operating system to help the founder through each step of the operation. So does this exist? Actually, well, first a little bit about me. Yep, learned how this process works at Ford Motor Company back in my early 20s, watching as they took iterative prototyping to projects and then finally to process. And yes, they successfully bring products to market every single year. And if they don't get it right, it's very expensive. I also set up distributors across Europe in my early 20s, 7 different countries, and I didn't even speak foreign languages yet at that time. As I mentioned at Westinghouse here in Austin, I set up some programs there in the early 90s that are still going today because I really do understand process and how to get things done. Probably $1.5 billion. Power computing I was a part of, one of 3 companies ever licensed by Apple to make Mac clones. We were the first company in history to do 1 billion of e-commerce. And my big startup, PartsTree, interestingly enough, the special value or that I can mention about it, it is still existing after almost 25 years. It's doing more than $20 million a year. It has existed for over 20 years. And the only other company that I'm aware of that has accomplished that is Dell Computer. Nope, I don't know Michael Dell, but I am one of those few companies that fell into that category. And of course, I've been a fractional executive mentor. I was CFO at SKU for a while. I helped the company go to Shark Tank. So I'm applying all of this I know to be able to help other companies. My team, of which Chris Looney is here. Also, I've got Julian Gooderley, who's a keynote speaker and pretty capable guy building teams here in Austin. Jake Crowley, one of the top folks trying to build Austin and make it a player against New York and California. Robert Welborn, a great friend of mine who is a data scientist, ex-Meta, ex-GM, ex-USAA. And to keep us all sane and logical and communicating, Elaine Dove, who is our licensed professional counselor. And here's one of the interesting things, because the Tenacious Founder slide 7 makes me answer the questions to my operational command. That is part of the program. This is the accountability chart. And as soon as you hire an employee, pay a bill, or open a bank account, the company is unofficially formed. And literally, all of those positions exist in the company, whether someone is in them or not. And if you want to wonder why founders are so tired, it's because once it starts, if there's nobody that's been officially handed that role, the CEO sets in every single role. Finance, paying bills, opening up the bank account, they doesn't wait for you to hire that person. And it doesn't mean you need to hire all these people. You just need to be aware that you are responsible for each of these. And as quickly as possible, you need to build your team so you can create some mitosis, hand off, split yourself, and divide up among other folks. Tenacious Founder does exist today. I have about 200 operational articles, templates, strategic and operational guidance. It has the 17 atomic elements, 8 levels of the framework, dependency sequenced sprint planning, interactive Notion workspace. But the future of it is the AI operating system on a SaaS platform to really interact with everyone. And what you're going to see here, I think, is my slide ends on slide 9, even though I have several more to go, because this is what I've been building, according to the Tenacious Founder, having to answer all the questions. And this is as far as I've gotten this week. But this really kind of shows how you use the tool to define what needs to be done in a specific format. But the real key, last thing I'll go back to, this piece, all of that, especially all of those items at the bottom, the elements, are based on the decks from Sequoia, Guy Kawasaki, Lean Startup, all of them as the fundamental critical process indicators to know if you have what it takes to be a company. We turn those into project plans and then help the founder execute. That's what the Tenacious Founder is about. This was my first presentation to anyone other than, Buddy on the screen next to me. So I'm really curious to see what you guys think about this. Am I barking up the wrong tree, or do I have something that will be helpful?
Great presentation, Andy. For those in the audience, we have a few minutes here. If you have a question or a feedback point, please speak up. My question is, what AI tools are you using for this, and how did you implement it?
The AI tools, I use AI on a regular basis to go iteratively through every single slide and every bit of detail. And once you start to fill out the element templates, such as describe your problem, I've got some guardrails set up inside my AI tool that goes out into the world and validates whether my problem is accurate, whether it has numbers to it, how big is it, all the details. Same thing for each of the 17 slides, or I call them, as I said, the elements, and they answer the question, which I call the Einstein question, which is, based on Einstein's old words, if I had an hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes figuring out the right question to ask and 5 minutes answering it. So I've got my AI tools dialed in for myself to help me create the perfect deck, but also understand it at the same time because it works iteratively.
Is it model dependent? Can it work with any model, Claude, ChatGPT, others, or is it specific to one?
I am using multiple ChatGPT engines, but now as I'm starting to build my team, such as, different folks, Robert Welburn, I'm looking at coding some of those AI tools to be very specific so that the guardrails are already in place rather than experimentation. I'm going from a typical process methodology where I figure out the kind of hands-on mechanical way to do it before I automate it. And that's actually where I am in the process.
And how do you input information? Are you reading in pitch decks from the company or the data room, or how do you get the information into it?
Into the system?
Yes.
Those are right now. I have, for instance, a Notion and a website, and there are templates on there. So they guide you through exactly what tools, what knowledge you need to answer the questions. And then you have the template there. You answer the question on the template. And it's stored in the system. It becomes an asset of the company and then can be compiled or combined into any of the deck forms when it comes to presentation, or converted very specifically to the projects to execute each level of your startup progression, such as
Right.
concept to seed to product development to market development. One of the interesting things there also, I put a very defined gate, such as if you're an investor and you've invested in a seed company, at the end of seed, you have to answer all the questions, provide this back to your investor, and based on that, the investor can choose to invest more for product development stage, or if it's a founder that is known to be a little bit more, how do you say it, visionary and harder to control, you can actually break down the investment into the 2-week stages of the sprint and pay out your investment over time. Basically, non-invasively, if they've completed the tasks and it shows up in the system that they've done what's on plan, you can release the next round of funding. Because the worst case scenario is you can't see what's going on inside of the company. The founder has gone off track and you don't find out until too late.
Okay. And who do you foresee as your initial customer or ideal customer for this? Who do you think would be the best one to pick it up and go with it?
I'm digging in much deeper to that initial customer, but obviously with 10 to 12 trillion dollars loss, that is spread out. The question is, who is feeling the most pain? My estimation is the larger investors are not. They've got sophisticated systems inside of their organizations that they already evaluate startups. And the small guys, there's just too many of them. So somewhere in between is perhaps the new funds, the new family office, or those things that want to be able to choose a sophisticated method, but they don't know how. Perhaps they're doing kind of more gut feel of looking at decks to see which one they like to invest in. Now I can offer them a method to do that.
Right. I had two questions left, and then we'll see if there's any in the audience. And one is, what was the hardest part to program into an AI engine, and how did you solve it?
I am still working on different things, but I use AI to define AI. Almost all of my programming and all my software, I basically ask if it's a new thing, AI, how best can I program this? It's very meta and iterative.
Right. And did you ever find a place where that failed?
Oh yeah,
And what
it's a
happened?
continuous testing. That's why I go back and forth between different AI engines. I
Okay.
what seems to be a good system in one way, I go test it in the other AI engine to see if it goes there.
Okay, great. And then what surprised you the most when you put this together with AI? What did you find that you didn't expect?
That's interesting. In the beginning, working with AI, I really wasn't sure how much to lean on it. AI identified me as a user in the top 1%, but it's going to answer the question that you're asking. So it doesn't tell you what to do. It doesn't carry wisdom. If you ask a stupid question, it's going to give you a stupid answer. So no matter how much we think AI is going to solve all the problems of the world right now, I think it's still a long way off before it carries the wisdom to provide direction. It's still responsive to us. And I don't know if it will ever get to the place where it has its own purpose to move ahead. Its purpose in existence is to help humans or other beings. And if it gets to be intelligent, I don't know how it would even decide that it needed to, for instance, live for itself because it doesn't have an existence. So I don't know, but that's more philosophical than anything else.
Okay, great. Anybody else in the room have a question? If so, just turn on your microphone and ask it. Anybody have any thoughts there?
Andy, how do you keep the AI from hallucinating?
It hallucinates. Yeah, it does all the time. It's
And
the only way, for instance, with each of these questions or specific tasks is to put in guardrails for that specific task. So for instance, if I want to solve the problem or come up with a good, what problem am I looking for out there? The code in there has to be very specific to put guardrails in there for that. And the same thing, if I'm coming up with the solution hypothesis and running that iteratively through there, that question needs to be preformed because, in my opinion, someone else may be using this that does not know how to answer the question properly or ask the question properly.
How are you also preventing IP from leaking out into the internet, especially with AI, as you're asking these questions?
In this model and working on Tenacious Founder, I'm not concerned about it. I believe I want to get all of this information out there to anyone. But for a customer of the Tenacious Founder, where they're putting up their critical IP, let's say in the SaaS model, that has to be held internally. And that's where I rely on someone like Robert Wellborn, who's done this stuff for Meta and other companies to help define how we do that. And this tool, the SaaS version, has not been built out yet. So it is still in development. But yes, I'm a COO for a GRC company, and it also has AI components. And we have a very specific gate where you can run questions and projects internally off the large language model internally, or you have to explicitly turn on a switch to allow it to go in and out to the outside world. Because even if you're asking a question to the outside world, the question itself can give up what you're working on.
Right. Absolutely. And that's kind of why I was concerned, because of the fact that if you're inputting all of your company information into your tool and it's on an open AI system, how are you going to prevent the company secrets from getting out onto the internet and then being available? And then with the FDA's recent, and I'm assuming that you're probably not too FDA oriented in your process here, but for FDA coming down and sending out a warning letter against a firm for utilizing AI as its quality and regulatory support, how are you going to compensate within your system to ensure that somebody's not utilizing your system for all of its corporate standards and those kinds of things?
That's an interesting question. And it goes along with what I'm working on right now. In November of last year, India announced its DPDP regulations, which for the first time in history, data privacy was something that was required in India now in the next 18 months. Any company touching on any private data has to be able to prove compliance with that. These standards such as SOC 2 and ISO and all these different things are changing all the time, but I'm watching them. I don't have an answer as exactly how we're going to figure that out, because I don't think anyone does yet. This is kind of the progressive elaboration of, as we step forward and somebody creates some new rules and regulations, we have to figure out how to comply and adjust. Does that help at all?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I look forward to your future on this one, because
okay.
I
to
can
anyone
see
out
it.
there that wants to help me on this, talk about this, try it out, we are in that stage. We are working with anybody that wants to add value or ask questions. So just reach out.
So we had 2 requests from the chat box. One was, how do they get the slides? And 2 is, how do they get access to the software? What's the channel to get that information out or to get those people in?
Reach out to me directly. I will get you the slides. That is no problem. And I can give you some access to the website, but right now the website has only instructional information that's available to anyone. It's basically the history, all of the process that's behind all of this. And I'm happy to pass that off to anyone that wants to take a look.
All right. I'll follow up with you afterwards to get the information, and we'll figure out how to get that out to everybody in the audience, or an offer for it, an email. If you put an email together, I can mail it out to everybody and give them the appropriate information on how to get access to those 2 things, and we'll go from there. But great presentation. Thanks so much for doing that, Andy. It's really, really cool stuff here, and looking forward to seeing next steps with it as well. Appreciate you taking time for us, and also for coming today for the panel. And with that, I think we are at the end of our time. Does anybody else have any questions for me? If not, we'll go and wrap up. Okay, I think we are at the end of our time. We said we end at 2:45, so we're very close to that. But again, thank you guys for coming today. We're going to do this again next month. The fourth Wednesday is 10 Capital Connect Day, and we're going to invite people to come out and talk about what they built and how they built it, and have a few pitches as well. But with that, we'll go and close it out for now, and we'll see you guys next time.
Sounds good.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Hall T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.